North Atlantic, March 1942. The dull thud against the hull of the SS Potlatch, just after 0300 hours, was not the expected groan of shifting cargo or the slap of a heavy wave, but something sharper, more metallic. It was a sound that for a fleeting instant shattered the prevailing confidence aboard American merchant vessels, a confidence born of vast distances and the perceived invulnerability of their maritime behemoths. This singular impact, a mere tremor in the deep, signaled the abrupt end of an illusion, a brutal re-education in the unforgiving calculus of wartime sea lanes, where every mile was contested and every ship a target. On the bridge, Captain Arthur J. Peterson, a man whose 52 years had been largely spent navigating the predictable rhythms of commercial shipping, felt the vibration through the soles of his worn boots. His tankers, like the Potlatch, were the arteries of the Allied war machine, carrying the lifeblood of fuel and supplies across an ocean increasingly fraught with unseen dangers. He had, like many of his peers, dismissed the persistent whispers of German U-boat activity as exaggerated, the threat of their torpedoes a distant, almost theoretical concern, particularly against the robust, steel-plated hulls of his modern fleet. The sheer scale of these vessels, designed for bulk transport, seemed to offer an inherent, if unquantifiable, protection. The Potlatch, a T2 SEA-1 tanker, represented the zenith of American shipbuilding efficiency, a vessel capable of carrying 141,000 barrels of oil. Its construction, standardized for rapid production, involved a welded hull, a departure from older riveted designs, which promised greater structural integrity. Production logs from Bethlehem Steel's Sparrows Point Yard indicated a construction time of just over 6 months for this class, a testament to American industrial might. These ships were built to endure the rigors of oceanic transit, not the focused violence of submarine warfare. Early intelligence reports, often filtered through naval liaisons, had consistently downplayed the efficacy of German U-boat attacks against well-found merchant vessels. The prevailing wisdom, reinforced by a lack of direct engagement in the Western Atlantic, suggested that the primary threat lay closer to European waters. American strategic planners, focused on the immense logistical challenge of supplying a global war, prioritized volume and speed, assuming that sheer numbers and the vastness of the ocean would offer sufficient protection. The Potlatch's armament, a single 4-inch deck gun mounted aft and a smattering of .50 caliber machine guns, was considered largely symbolic, a deterrent against surface raiders, not a defense against submerged predators. The gun crew, mostly reservists with minimal training, treated their drills with a casualness that bordered on disdain, often joking about the tiny German guns that would never reach them. The perceived threat was so minimal that many crews considered the guns more of a morale booster than a serious weapon system. The design philosophy behind these tankers emphasized cargo capacity and fuel efficiency over defensive capabilities. Naval architects, working under immense pressure to deliver ships quickly, focused on proven designs and materials. The hull plating, typically around .75 inches of mild steel, was considered more than adequate for the stresses of heavy seas and routine dockside bumps. No specific consideration was given to resisting shaped charges or high-velocity projectiles. The incident report, filed later by Captain Peterson, would detail a subsequent, more violent impact, confirming the presence of a German U-boat. This initial, almost gentle contact had merely been the preamble, a subtle reordering of reality for those aboard, a quiet whisper before the storm. The gray light of dawn, October 29, 1940, found U-30, a Type 7A U-boat, running on the surface. Her commander, Lieutenant Fritz Julius Lemp, had maintained a westerly course through the night, pushing the boat's 2-man M6V 4046 6-cylinder diesel engines to their maximum continuous output of 1,160 horsepower each, achieving a surface speed of 17 knots. This speed was critical for covering vast stretches of the North Atlantic, a desolate expanse where encounters were rare and often fleeting. The U-boat's silhouette, low and sleek, cut through the moderate swells, leaving a faint, almost invisible wake. A watch officer, scanning the horizon with Zeiss 7x50 binoculars, reported smoke plumes at 0712. The distant smudges, initially indistinct against the low sun, slowly resolved into the telltale signs of a convoy. Lemp ordered the diesels throttled back, reducing the boat's speed to a more economical 10 knots to conserve fuel and minimize the exhaust signature. The U-boat's hydrophones, sensitive instruments housed in a dome beneath the bow, were activated, their operators listening intently for the rhythmic thrum of propellers. The hydrophone operators confirmed the contact at 0735, reporting multiple distinct propeller signatures, indicating a large formation. Lemp's tactical assessment, based on the course and speed estimates, placed the convoy on a heading likely bound for British ports, laden with vital supplies. The U-30, with its 4 bow torpedo tubes and 1 stern tube, carried a standard load of 11 G7A steam-powered torpedoes, each weighing 1,528 kilograms and armed with a 280-kilogram hexanite warhead. These weapons were designed for precision strikes against merchant vessels, aiming to rupture hulls and disable propulsion systems. Lemp ordered the boat to submerge at 8 o'clock, the ballast tanks flooding with a controlled rush of seawater. The transition from surface hunter to submerged predator was swift, the U-boat disappearing beneath the waves in less than a minute. At a depth of 50 meters, the U-boat became a silent, unseen presence, relying entirely on its hydrophones and the occasional periscope observation to track its prey. The pressure hull, constructed from 22 millimeters thick, high-tensile steel, easily withstood the immense external pressure, a testament to German engineering. The convoy, designated HX-80, consisted of 30 merchant ships, primarily oil tankers and cargo vessels, escorted by a single Flower-class corvette, HMS Gladiolus. The corvette, armed with a 4-inch main gun and depth charges, represented the convoy's primary defense against submarine attack. However, its top speed of 16 knots meant it struggled to keep pace with faster convoys, and its sonar capabilities, while present, were rudimentary by later war standards. The merchant ships themselves, designed for cargo capacity, possessed minimal defensive armament, typically a single stern-mounted 4-inch gun and a few anti-aircraft machine guns. Operated by naval gun crews, Lemp began a slow, deliberate approach, maneuvering U-30 to a position ahead of the convoy, aiming to intercept its path. This required careful calculation of the convoy's speed and course, factoring in the U-boat's own submerged speed of 8 knots, significantly slower than its surface capability. The goal was to reach a firing position unobserved, ideally within 1,000 meters of a target, maximizing the probability of a successful torpedo hit. The journey through the cold, dark water was one of patience and precise navigation, a silent hunt unfolding beneath the indifferent waves. The Atlantic, 1942. The merchant fleet, a vital artery of the Allied war effort, churned across the vast expanse, its vessels laden with the sinews of war. American tankers, in particular, were titans of the sea, their massive hulls designed for capacity and endurance, not combat. They were built to carry oil, a liquid gold that fueled the machines of a global conflict, and their sheer size often instilled a sense of impregnability in their crews. These tankers, often exceeding 10,000 gross tons, dwarfed the lean predatory U-boats that stalked the shipping lanes. The average Type 7 U-boat, the workhorse of the German submarine fleet, displaced around 769 tons submerged, a mere fraction of a tanker's bulk. This disparity in size, coupled with the U-boat's stealth, often led to a dangerous underestimation of its offensive capabilities by the surface crews. The visible armament of a U-boat, typically a single 8.8-centimeter deck gun and a 2-centimeter flak cannon, appeared almost negligible against the sheer mass of a fully loaded T-2 tanker. Damage reports from early engagements reveal a recurring pattern of initial disbelief. One report from the SS Ohio, torpedoed in the summer of 1942, noted the crew's initial assessment of the U-boat's torpedo as a harmless explosion far from the hull. This perception stemmed from a peacetime mentality where the primary threats to a ship were weather and mechanical failure, not a concealed, precision weapon. The U-boat's torpedo, a 53.3-centimeter G7A or G7E, packed a warhead typically containing 280 kilograms of high explosive. This explosive force, concentrated at a single point below the waterline, was designed to rupture a ship's integrity, not merely to dent its armor. The construction of these tankers, while robust for their intended purpose, offered little defense against such an attack. Their hulls were typically constructed from mild steel plates, ranging from 15 to 25 millimeters in thickness, designed to withstand the stresses of heavy seas and cargo, not the concussive force of a torpedo. The internal bulkheads, though numerous, were primarily for cargo segregation and structural support, not for blast absorption. A single torpedo strike often resulted in catastrophic structural failure, leading to rapid flooding and frequently explosive fires due to the volatile nature of their cargo. Production logs illustrate the scale of the challenge. American shipyards, driven by the exigencies of war, launched tankers at an unprecedented rate, often exceeding one new vessel per day by late 1943. This focus on rapid production, while essential for maintaining supply lines, meant that defensive armament was often an afterthought. Early war tankers frequently carried only a few .50 caliber machine guns, intended more for anti-aircraft defense than anti-submarine warfare. The strategic implication was clear. The sheer volume of targets, coupled with their vulnerability, provided U-boat commanders with an abundance of opportunities. The ideological implication was more subtle. A nation accustomed to projecting power through battleships and aircraft carriers was now fighting a war where its most vital assets were being systematically destroyed by an unseen enemy, often with a single precise blow. The laughter, when it came, was brief, replaced swiftly by the cold, hard reality of steel tearing and water rushing in. North Atlantic, September 1942. The convoy, a loose assembly of merchant hulls, churned eastward, a dark smudge against the vast, indifferent ocean. Aboard the SS Ohio, a T-2 tanker laden with 140,000 barrels of aviation fuel, the crew had settled into the monotonous rhythm of wartime passage, a routine punctuated by distant depth charges and the endless rolling gray. They had heard the whispers, the reports of German U-boats, but the sheer expanse of the sea and the reassuring presence of their escorts fostered a dangerous complacency. Below the surface, the U-375, a Type V6C boat, had stalked the convoy for hours, a silent hunter in the sunless depths. Its hydrophones had picked up the distinct thrum of multiple propellers, a symphony of targets. Kapitän-Leutnant Jürgen Konenkamp, peering through the attack periscope, had selected the largest tanker, its silhouette a dark, inviting mass against the fading light. The calculations were precise, honed by months of relentless training and grim experience. The command, Rohr 1 und 2, Los, was a low murmur in the control room, followed by the hiss of compressed air. 2 G7A torpedoes, each carrying a 617-pound warhead of hexanote, shot from their tubes, leaving faint trails of bubbles that quickly dissipated into the turbulent water. These were not the hastily produced, often unreliable torpedoes of earlier war years. These were finely engineered instruments of destruction, designed for maximum kinetic energy transfer and a devastating blast effect. Aboard the Ohio, the watch had just changed. The new lookout, a young man from Nebraska, scanned the horizon with practiced indifference. The sea was calm, the air crisp. There was no warning, no telltale wake. The first torpedo struck amidships, just below the waterline, with a sound that was less an explosion and more a colossal, tearing impact, a sound that vibrated through the very bones of the ship. Damage reports, later compiled from surviving crew accounts, detailed the immediate aftermath. The initial detonation ripped a jagged hole nearly 30 feet wide in the tanker's port side, instantly rupturing several fuel tanks. The sheer force of the blast buckled steel plates, sheared rivets, and sent a geyser of crude oil and seawater high into the air. The internal bulkheads, designed to contain such breaches, offered only momentary resistance against the overwhelming pressure. Within seconds, a secondary explosion, far more violent, erupted as the volatile aviation fuel ignited. A towering pillar of flame, black and orange, shot skyward, illuminating the darkening ocean with an infernal glow. The heat was immense, searing, vaporizing everything in its immediate vicinity. The Ohio, a vessel built to transport the very essence of modern warfare, had become a funeral pyre for itself and its cargo. The fire spread with terrifying speed, fueled by the spilled aviation gasoline. Steel plating, a quarter-inch thick, glowed cherry red before warping and twisting into grotesque shapes. The ship's structure, once a testament to industrial might, began to groan and tear apart under the combined stresses of the explosion, the fire, and the relentless pull of the sea. The vessel, designed for endurance, was now simply a burning hulk. The second torpedo, arriving moments after the first, struck near the stern, compounding the damage. While its explosive force was somewhat diminished by the already catastrophic state of the ship, it severed the propeller shaft and destroyed the steering gear, ensuring the Ohio was not only burning but also adrift and uncontrollable. The ship, once a symbol of American logistical power, was now a broken, burning ruin. North Atlantic, March 1943. The tanker SS William B. Travis sliced through the frigid swells, a behemoth laden with 100,000 barrels of aviation fuel, its crew confident in the convoy's protective embrace. Below decks, the engine room thrummed with the rhythmic pulse of its steam turbines. A mechanical heart driving 10,000 tons of steel and volatile cargo across a hostile ocean. The American tankers, many of them Liberty ships, were built for volume and speed, their designs prioritizing cargo capacity and rapid construction over heavy defensive armament. They carried a single 4-inch deck gun, often manned by inexperienced naval armed crews, a weapon largely symbolic against the true predators of the deep. The U-boat, U-338, commanded by Captain Lieutenant Manfred Kinzel, had stalked the convoy for hours, its hydrophones painting a detailed sonic picture of the lumbering giants above. Kinzel's vessel, a Type 5 V6, represented the apex of German submarine engineering, a compact hunter displacing 769 tons submerged, capable of 17 knots on the surface and 7.6 knots underwater. Its primary armament consisted of 5 53.3-centimeter torpedo tubes, 4 forward and 1 aft, each capable of launching a G7E electric torpedo with a 280-kilogram warhead. These torpedoes, though slower than their steam-driven counterparts, left no visible wake, making evasive action nearly impossible once launched. A sudden jarring impact reverberated through the Travis, a sound unlike any storm wave or engine malfunction. It was a sharp, metallic thud, followed almost instantly by a deeper, more resonant thrumming that seemed to vibrate the very air. On the bridge, the watch officer instinctively gripped the rail, his eyes scanning the churning water for any sign of disturbance. The initial shock gave way to a sickening lurch as the ship's forward momentum faltered, a tangible resistance against the vast inertia of the vessel. Damage reports, relayed through frantic internal communications, painted a grim picture. The torpedo had struck midships, just aft of the No. 3 cargo tank, a critical blow to the tanker's structural integrity. The blast had ripped a jagged hole, estimated by the surviving engineers to be approximately 15 feet in diameter, through the double-plated hull, immediately flooding the adjacent pump room and a section of the engine compartment. The sheer force of the detonation, a concentrated release of 580 megajoules, had buckled internal bulkheads, compromising the watertight compartments designed to contain such breaches. The rapid ingress of seawater, estimated at 500 tons per minute, caused an immediate and severe list to port, pulling the vast vessel down by its damaged side. The 4-inch deck gun, positioned aft, now pointed uselessly skyward, its small caliber and slow traverse utterly inadequate against a submerged attacker. The crew, trained primarily in fire suppression and basic damage control, found themselves overwhelmed by the scale of the destruction, their drills proving insufficient against the sudden, catastrophic tearing of the ship's vital organs. The illusion of the American tanker's robust invulnerability, fostered by their sheer size and the perceived weakness of German submarine armament, shattered with the first geyser of sea foam and ruptured steel. The U-boat, a silent, unseen predator, had demonstrated its deadly efficiency, its tiny guns in fact launching devastating projectiles that could cleave through the stoutest hulls. The Travis, once a symbol of American industrial might, now became a testament to the brutal realities of naval warfare. A floating coffin for its precious cargo and, for many, its crew. The tanker, now listing noticeably to port, struggled to maintain its place in the convoy. A plume of black smoke, thick and oily, streamed from its stern, a stark banner against the gray Atlantic sky, marking it as a crippled beast. Below decks, damage control parties fought the spreading fires, their efforts hampered by ruptured fuel lines that fed the inferno with a terrifying, liquid breath. Naval architects' reports from the period indicate that the T2 SEA-1 tanker, a standard design, possessed 17 transverse bulkheads and 2 longitudinal bulkheads, forming 27 cargo tanks and 10 wing tanks. The German shell, likely a 10.5 centimeter round from a Type 9C U-boat, had penetrated the starboard side of cargo tank number 7, just above the waterline, tearing a jagged 3-foot by 2-foot hole. The initial explosion had not only ignited the cargo, but had also buckled the adjacent bulkhead to cargo tank number 8, compromising its structural integrity. Production logs confirm that the average T2 tanker, built in Liberty shipyards across the United States, required approximately 350,000 man-hours to construct. This particular vessel, the SS Ohioan, launched from the Kaiser shipyards in Portland, Oregon, in 1943, represented an investment of roughly $3 million in wartime currency. Its cargo of 141,000 barrels of aviation fuel, destined for airfields in England, carried an estimated value of $500,000, a critical resource now burning away in the mid-Atlantic. The attack shattered the convoy's fragile sense of security. The rhythmic thrum of engines, once a comforting pulse of collective strength, now seemed to carry an undercurrent of vulnerability. The U-boat, though unseen, had asserted its presence with chilling finality, demonstrating that even within the protective embrace of destroyers, no ship was truly invulnerable. The vastness of the ocean, once a mere passage, became a theater of unseen threats, its depths concealing predators. The dark, cold waters of the Atlantic, stretching from the American seaboard to the British Isles, became a vast, liquid battlefield where the war's industrial arithmetic was brutally calculated. German U-boat commanders, operating under orders that prioritized tonnage sunk over individual engagements, understood their mission as a direct assault on the Allied capacity for war. Each tanker, each freighter, represented not just a vessel, but a quantifiable unit of strategic resource, a link in the chain that supplied the burgeoning war effort in Europe. Naval intelligence reports from early 1942, compiled from intercepted radio traffic and prisoner interrogations, painted a stark picture of this doctrine. The U-boat arm under Admiral Donitz aimed to sever the transatlantic lifeline, believing that if they could sink more tonnage than the Allies could build or repair, the war would become unsustainable for Britain. This was not a fight for territory or a clash of armies, but a cold, hard equation of production versus destruction. The U-boat VICC, the workhorse of the German fleet, carried a complement of 14 torpedoes, each capable of delivering a 600-pound warhead of TNT. While its 8.8-centimeter deck gun was primarily for surface engagements against unescorted merchantmen or for scuttling already damaged vessels, the torpedo was the primary instrument of this economic warfare. The average speed of a VICC submerged was 7.6 knots, allowing it to stalk convoys for hours, waiting for the opportune moment to strike. Production logs from German shipyards indicated a peak output of 24 U-boats per month in 1942, a relentless pace designed to overwhelm Allied defenses. Countering this, American shipyards, particularly those specializing in Liberty ships and T-2 tankers, ramped up to unprecedented levels, with some yards launching a vessel in as little as 42 days from keel laying to delivery. This industrial race, often unseen by the public, was as critical as any land battle. The strategic implication of this U-boat campaign was profound. Every barrel of oil lost, every ton of steel sunk, directly impacted the operational capabilities of Allied forces. Fuel shortages in Britain, though never catastrophic, became a constant concern, influencing everything from civilian rationing to the scheduling of bomber raids. The very geography of the war, with its vast oceanic distances, amplified the U-boat's leverage, turning the Atlantic into a choke point of global supply. The U-boat war was a stark demonstration of how deeply industrial capacity intertwined with military strategy. It was a war waged not just with guns and torpedoes, but with production schedules, shipping manifests, and the calculated risk of every voyage. The ocean, indifferent to human struggle, simply absorbed the losses. The sinking of the Virginia off Hatteras in March 1942, followed by the destruction of the Gulf America just days later, irrevocably altered the perception of the Atlantic. Naval intelligence reports, initially focused on convoy routing and U-boat concentrations in the North Atlantic, now grappled with a new, terrifying reality. The eastern seaboard, once considered a sanctuary, had become a hunting ground, its coastal waters transformed into an extension of the war zone. Damage assessments from these early attacks revealed a consistent pattern of torpedo strikes amidships, often followed by a second, devastating blow to the engine room. The Virginia, struck by a single torpedo from U-504, broke in two and sank in less than an hour, her cargo of 93,000 barrels of fuel oil igniting into a towering inferno visible for miles. The Gulf America, also carrying a full load of petroleum products, suffered a similar fate, her stern settling rapidly as flames consumed the superstructure. Pre-war naval doctrine had largely discounted the threat of sustained U-boat operations so close to the American mainland, focusing instead on the protection of transatlantic shipping lanes. The U.S. Navy's destroyer fleet, built for offensive operations and convoy escort in distant waters, was thinly spread. Only a handful of aging patrol boats and converted yachts were available for coastal defense, their sonar capabilities limited, their armaments inadequate against the hardened hulls of Type 9 U-boats. The German strategy, codenamed Operation Drumbeat, capitalized on this unpreparedness. U-boat commanders, operating with relative impunity, found American coastal cities brightly lit, their maritime traffic moving without blackout restrictions or coordinated anti-submarine patrols. The target-rich environment, coupled with the absence of effective countermeasures, allowed for an unprecedented rate of sinkings. Production logs from German shipyards confirm the strategic intent behind the U-boat offensive. In the first quarter of 1942, 12 new Type 7 and Type 9 U-boats entered service, specifically designed for extended patrols and equipped with improved torpedoes. These vessels, capable of carrying up to 22 torpedoes, could remain on station for weeks, exploiting the vulnerabilities of the American merchant fleet. The immediate consequence was a scramble to implement defensive measures. The U.S. Navy's Eastern Sea Frontier Command, under immense pressure, began requisitioning civilian trawlers and yachts, hastily arming them with whatever depth charges and small-caliber guns could be found. Blackout regulations were finally enforced along the coast, dimming the once bright navigational aids that had inadvertently guided U-boats to their prey. Yet, the scale of the threat demanded a more comprehensive response. The initial losses, totaling 82 ships and 500,000 tons in the first 3 months of 1942 alone, demonstrated a critical gap in naval preparedness. This stark reality forced a fundamental reevaluation of resource allocation and strategic priorities, shifting focus from distant theaters to the immediate defense of the homeland. The Pan Massachusetts, a tanker of 8,200 gross tons, struck by U-128 off Cape Canaveral on February 16, 1942, burned for 3 days before sinking, a persistent beacon of the new and brutal reality.